just how has Corona impacted or altered your operations going into hurricane season, and especially when we have multiple storms tracking in the Atlantic or the Gulf?
Yeah, here at the Hurricane Center, we've been here still 24/7 through this whole thing with the marine forecast and keeping an eye on the tropics. And we're taking the CDC guidance basically, and we're separating ourselves. We're using precautions, social distancing. We've looked at workstations and the placement. So we're doing everything we can here to stay healthy for the season so we can be here for you all.
That's great. Thank you. So in the past few years, the cone of uncertainty, the distance has improved considerably. Can you explain some of the advancements in technology or the tools that have helped improve that cone?
Yeah, the cone of uncertainty is based on our last 5 years of error. So 2/3 of the time, you could expect the center to be somewhere inside that cone. So we have better modeling, better technology, better computers have really just made such a big difference in that forecast of the track. We still have a long way to go with the intensity. We still have this rapid intensification that occurs in these hurricanes. And it's just so tough to predict. So, but remember, it's so important though, that cone is based on error. The actual impacts are well outside that cone. In some cases, some of your heavy rain bands and your tornadoes, just an incredible amount of impact, especially with the rainfall outside that cone.
Is the National Hurricane Center planning to continue to provide any insight for the public on that? I know the cone of uncertainty is hard to understand for the general public. And yeah, like you said, the impacts are felt well outside of the cone. Is there anything moving forward that you guys are working on to kind of improve that recognition for people?
Yeah, it's interesting because the better we do with the actual physical science of meteorology, the smaller the cone. So the better the forecast, the smaller the cone, more impacts outside the cone. We have 9 social science projects going on at the same time. So we're trying to collect data. We're trying to collect data on how we can portray that cone, a better way to do it, looking at all of our products. And, the storm surge products were vetted through social science, and also you look at the arrival of the tropical storm force winds. Those also went through a whole period of time where they were evaluated by social scientists. So 9 projects. So we're going to get all this data, and then we're going to come back in interviews like this and say, here's what we found. Here's what we're thinking about doing. What do you all think? And so we're going to go there together, because the worst thing could do is make a bunch of changes and make things worse. So we're going to collect that social science and go somewhere together. There may be some changes coming.
So those are projects that are going on right now. Do you have an end date for some of those research projects?
Yeah, by the end of the year, we should get a lot of the data, so we'll start evaluating it, and then we'll start coming up with better ways to do it. It may not be a lot of change. It may be where we put more impacts on the same graphic, like we have with the wind. We put the orange blob around the center, just trying to show that these impacts, but that's just the wind. Where do we put the rain? Where do we put the storm surge? Look at Irma, and you have storm surge all the way in Jacksonville, so far away from the center of Irma. How do you portray that? Right now we have separate products. Is there a way to do it in one map? That's what we're going to try to find out.
That was kind of my next question. There are some improvements and some new changes or new offerings from the National Hurricane Center with the storm surge forecast this year. Can you explain some of those changes or new products and how they'll benefit the people?
Yeah, 2 big changes. One of them is an experimental map of storm surge. And it's, you think about it, we already have some of those maps, but this is a very simple map. It just gives you a quick look for social media, for briefings, low bandwidth type of graphic to say, here's the trouble spots. So that's what that one is. But the other one is a 60-hour point. Everybody's going to see a new dot inside the cone. It's a 60-hour point that we're forecasting. And really the big reason we're doing that is because we need the timing. We need the size of that storm at that 60-hour point, because its size and the forward speed has so much to do with that storm surge forecast. In most cases, even more to do with the storm surge than even the category.
Great, thank you. So we talked about you mentioned earlier, we have a lot of improvements with the intensity forecast. Are you guys doing any research, or do you have any new technology coming out or new tools to help you kind of improve that in either this year or the coming years?
Yeah, the intensity part of it is, we're making improvements, but it's slower than the improvements we've made with the track. So some new things, there's satellite data that we're just scratching the surface of how much data that's actually trying to come in. So we're trying to analyze all of that. But the other part of it is looking at the actual oceans. You think about the ocean temperature, most of those sensors are right there at the surface, but what's going on underneath? what's going on with the total heat content of the actual ocean. So partnering with the Navy, NOAA, coming together, there's actually pushing gliders into the water where these gliders can go underwater. And I've seen, I've been out here to Virginia Key where they're actually making some of these, and it's absolutely fascinating to look at the data. So we're looking at, what are we stirring up? Is it cold water or is it warm water? There's some sort of secret possibly in the oceans in this rapid intensification puzzle.
New ingredient to that puzzle. Yeah, it's really cool to look into. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions from the public when it comes to the National Hurricane Center?
Well, I think one of them is, you just start looking at, the outreach part of it is the water part. I talk about it all the time. I mean, I kind of bend this back towards, the water threat's just incredible. And, and I always talk about this. I go to talks, and it's a little dramatic here, but I ask people to close their eyes and think about what they see when they think of a hurricane. And they always talk about the wind. And the reality is, you look at history, 90% of fatalities in these tropical systems historically is the water. Half of those storm surge, which we evacuate for, but the other part's the inland part, the rainfall inland. And we look at that in 2016, 2017, 2018, 83% of the fatalities was inland flooding, half of those in automobiles. So that's a big misconception. That's something that we have to keep talking about. And the key messages, all the things that we do here, I walk outside this door out in operations, we watch every single word to make sure that we're able to do a good job portraying all those impacts.
Great. So last year, Hurricane Dorian is probably one of the more memorable storms. And I know that name hasn't specifically been retired yet because we haven't had that full meeting just yet. But what did we learn from Hurricane Dorian that we can, use moving forward into this season? Or, how did you guys implement anything that you guys learned into, your forecasts?
Yeah, I think the most striking thing for me, I definitely want to share what probably was the biggest thing for me. We always see these pictures of the full-blown hurricane, the eye, the hurricane hunters going into them. That's what we think of. But what's so tricky is the genesis phase. And in other words, when they first start, there were 3 scenarios for Dorian. And it's important to have this conversation because each one has such a huge difference in what the impact is. So if it was left of the cone, Dorian would have been shredded by Hispaniola, all the mountains and the terrain. It would have just been a rainstorm, probably wouldn't have reformed, some rain for Florida, maybe even Cuba. Center of the track would have been something in between, probably impacting Florida even more with a hurricane. But the right side, the center, they had 3 centers. Think about this. Dorian during the genesis phase had 3 centers. Any of these scenarios could have took place. The eventual one was the right one where it jumped. It means no land, lots of warm water, plenty of time to get geared up. Any one of those was a reasonable scenario during that genesis phase. That's how tricky the intensity forecast is. And that's why we always got to pay attention to this, but realize there's a lot of error, especially in the extended forecast.
So in that genesis phase, when there is the possibility for those multiple centers and which one is going to take precedence and really develop into that storm, how early are you guys continuing to plan, the hurricane hunters to fly into that to see which one is the strongest?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. We had the hurricane hunters in there trying to continuously fly to see which one of those centers was taking hold. We were watching all 3 of them, trying to figure out which one was going to be the eventual center. Once we saw that jump to the right, then we knew kind of what the impact was going to be.
You guys go over that data?
Yeah, we go over the data, and it's actually interesting because even while the hurricane hunters are out there, they could fly their mission and come back. But if we're starting to see some interesting things, we're, really a critical time, they can actually spend more time out there and provide more data that comes back to us. We're in constant communication with them. Hey, fly over here. We see something in the satellite, fly over here. We need to look at this. It's that kind of coordination that goes on behind the scenes that not everybody gets to see.
So looking back and looking forward, what are we expecting in the coming months for this hurricane season?
Yeah, every indicator from the heat content of the oceans to La Nina, which means you're going to have a favorable upper level pattern, not a lot of shear. The African monsoon looks to be active. And you add all these things up, it really does point to an active season. And it really it's not a prediction for landfall. It's not a prediction of where that's gonna hit. But the overall Atlantic Basin looks to be pretty active, and that's why planning is everything. And that's why we get back to really looking at this, planning early, getting ready for this. I think everybody needs to plan as if we're going to be impacted in any given location. That really reduces the stress.
Is there anything else that you would like to add? I know we have a couple minutes left. I don't want to push you right up to that limit, but anything else you would like to add for, the public to hear from you guys going forward?
I think it's the big thing is, we're here as we always are at any hurricane season. We're going to be here with the watches and warnings and the forecast, but we need everybody to plan early. We need everybody to really look at their kit, the home kit, the food, the supplies, just like they always would. But the other part of it is know your zone. If you're in one of those storm surge zones, you have to know where to go. And depending where you are in the country, there could be some changes in where you go. So listen to the local officials, pay attention to your local communities to see if there's any changes. If you understand those early, that really reduces the stress when there's a hurricane threat.
Okay, and one final question for you. Looking at the season forecast, it is slightly above average for this year. In your opinion, how accurate have the National Hurricane Center's preseason forecasts been in previous years?
Yeah, they're accurate, and that's why if you think about it, there's enough range. You notice how we do that at NOAA. There's a range there, and the reason is because you get a plus or minus. The further you go out, the better the chance for error. So what this is? It really is a tool to say greater than average type of season. We got to get ready. If there's one storm on Earth, if it impacts you, then it's a busy season. So this is just another tool to start really looking at our planning and look for the season. And yeah, there's a good degree of accuracy, but the other part of it is just realize it's not a prediction for that landfall. Getting ready, being prepared, that's everything when it comes to hurricanes.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining me this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks for being a big part of the team. Appreciate it.
No problem. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.